Let me get over to the first slide. We're going to talk about popular diets after bariatric surgery. When the honeymoon is over and you're starting to wonder, what else can I do? That's what this is all about. My name is Steph Wagner. I've been a bariatric surgery dietitian since 2009, and I live in Kansas City with my husband and my two kids. You can find me at bariatricfoodcoach.com. Tons of blogs, videos, recipes, tons of free resources at that website. And there's also other areas of the website where you can work with me more. You can unlock recipes, you can unlock courses, you can unlock community, and all sorts of stuff. So definitely come find me on the internet. Some acknowledgments here. Jana Wolf is a dear friend and fellow bariatric dietitian. She and I dug into this topic together, and we were like, okay, let's each research these popular diets that we hear a lot about and then come back and discuss what we found. So it was really fun to do this topic in collaboration with her. And Erica Peruzzi did a lot of the slide design for me. She was an intern with me at the time. She's now very close to being an official dietitian herself. So this is an outline of what we're going to cover. Quick, we're going to do a background of defining obesity as a disease and the treatment options and why that matters before we talk about the popular diets of today. So we kind of need to orient ourselves before we just jump into, should I do keto? Should I do intermittent fasting? Should I do Noom? What about a pouch reset? We're going to talk about all of those. So first I want to kind of orient ourselves to obesity as a chronic disease and why this matters. It really is a big mindset shift. If we just think of living in a larger body as an issue of willpower, and that means that I need to diet more, I need to eat less, I need to work out harder, that this is a character flaw, and that I need to find the right diet, and that is the answer to my problems. I just need to find the right diet that I can stick to. It is really missing the core consideration that this is a disease that is complex, that needs different treatment, different approaches. It's not about eating less and working out harder. It is much more complicated than that, which is why we need different treatment. So the Obesity Medicine Association defines obesity as a chronic, relapsing, multifactorial neurobehavioral disease. This is a big definition just to illustrate that this is not simple, wherein an increase in body fat promotes adipose tissue dysfunction and abnormal fat mass physical forces, resulting in adverse metabolic, biomechanical, and psychosocial health consequences. All that to say, once the body has obesity, which is there's a kind of a different things that technically diagnose obesity as a disease, but it's a disease of body fat. And when there's dysfunction in body fat, makes it very difficult to maintain long-term weight management, which is why we treat it with different things like surgery or like medication, along with nutrition and exercise. So it's not simple. Metabolic and bariatric surgery is a treatment to a complicated disease. And bariatric surgery is the most effective treatment of obesity. It allows substantial sustained weight loss to improve or resolve obesity-associated comorbidities, thereby reducing mortality. We are seeing a lot of incredible success with newer medications, the GLP-1 class of medications. There are 2 more medications in stage 3 FDA trials showing even more average weight loss. But still, as it stands, bariatric surgery is the most effective treatment, has the highest average percentage of weight loss. So it is the most effective treatment for the disease of obesity, but it is very encouraging that we also see a lot of benefit with medication options also. And that is very helpful in the long-term management. Again, it's a chronic disease. So somebody's had metabolic and bariatric surgery, they're years post-op, and they are either not losing additional weight and their obesity-related diseases are returning. The conditions that are exacerbated by obesity um, need additional help, a GLP-1 can be helpful. Or if there's relapsing weight, again, it's a chronic relapsing condition. So there are definitely post-op patients that will utilize a GLP-1 medication years, more, if you're more than a year or so post-op. Um, I work with patients all the time that have had bariatric surgery and are also using a medication to manage obesity in later years. In the first year after surgery, typically we don't use a GLP-1 medication. And typically, that is what we call the honeymoon phase after the metabolic and bariatric surgery. So the honeymoon phase is the first 6 to 18 months after surgery when weight loss is the most efficient. Hunger is typically at its lowest. Everyone's experience is a little bit different. Restriction is at the most powerful, and hormonal and metabolic changes are at their best. So that is traditionally what we call the honeymoon phase, that first year after surgery. But in this conversation, I want to talk about when the honeymoon starts to fade. It is tempting to start looking around to alternative solutions. And we start wondering, what about that diet that somebody told me about? And what about that Instagram person that told me about that? Or, what are these mainstream diets and should I be considering something else? Part of it is managing our expectations. The more we talk about what to expect after metabolic bariatric surgery, then it can be helpful to know, like, okay, they said this was going to happen, or I knew to expect this. So let's talk about expectations. More than 95% of patients will successfully lose half of their extra body weight or more after a surgery for obesity. What that means, and that's from the ASMBS website. ASMBS is the kind of the governing body over metabolic bariatric surgery clinics. It's the American Society of Metabolic and Bariatric Surgery. Say that 10 times fast. Okay, so if somebody, I don't love BMI, but we use it in kind of clinical terminology. If somebody's going to do a research study, it just kind of makes things a little black and white. It's not really the best, but we still use it. So we're going to say, when they say someone loses half of their extra body weight, what that means is if I had 100 pounds to lose to be at a BMI of 25, which is considered normal BMI. I don't think that everyone needs to be at a BMI of 25, so please don't hear me say that. But that's what we say for these clinical attributes. Okay, if I needed to lose 100 pounds to be at a BMI of 25, then that they would say that's 100 pounds of extra body weight. So if I lost half of my extra pounds, if I lost 50 pounds, then I lost half of that extra body weight. So let me read that again. More than 95% of patients will successfully lose half of their extra body weight or more. So that's a really big number. I mean, I don't know about you, but that's more than someone's probably going to lose without having a metabolic and bariatric surgery. So losing half of the weight of extra weight. Less than 5% of patients lose 100% of their extra body weight. Okay, so what that means is less than 5% of patients lose to a BMI of 25. So that's why I say, don't hear me say you're going to get to a BMI of 25. Because if you look at that BMI chart and you think, oh, I'm 5'4", I need to weigh 150 pounds. I don't even know if that's the real number because I don't live and breathe by BMI. So that's why it's helpful to talk about expectations. Because if you think I need to be at a BMI of 25 and 95% of patients don't get to a BMI of 25, you might be tempted to think that you didn't succeed. And it is not true. Statistically, less than 5% of people will be at a BMI of 25. Gastric bypass patients on average means some lose more, some lose less. On average, they lose approximately 70% of their extra body weight initially. And 2 years or more after surgery, they will regain approximately 5% of their extra body weight. Again, talking about expectations, it's good to talk about that you should expect to see some rebound a couple years after that first year, after the honeymoon year. So 70%, if I had 100 pounds to lose and I lose 70 pounds of that, and then a couple years later, I gain 5 pounds back, but that's still significantly more than if I'd not had a surgical procedure in most cases. Okay. 10-year post-op data shows weight regain of approximately 20 to 25% is to be expected. So this number probably changes a lot because what we learn and what we do differently in a 10-year span changes quite a bit. But I'd have to look at what year this number came out. The A&D is that is the Dietitian Association. So 10-year post-op weight regain 20 to 25%. So expectations say rebound weight actually is something to expect. So managing expectations can be really helpful to know that this is part of the journey and that you didn't fail, you didn't break anything. Comparing the statistics, weight loss attempts without surgery on average lose little weight and may gain weight in the long term, kind of a yo-yo dieting. Obesity is a complex condition with various contributing factors and treatment outcomes. Even after surgery, patients need regular follow-up for evaluation and support and additional treatment options when deemed appropriate. So there may be times where it's like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and consider a medication in addition to surgery to manage my hunger, to quiet the food noise, to help me. I've made all these changes in my food and my nutrition and my physical activity, but I need help going a little further. Not because I'm trying to get to a BMI of 25, but because my body needs a little more help responding. And my doctor feels that this is a good way to try one more treatment option. I really like these next two studies. Again, we're kind of orienting ourselves to obesity as a disease, that managing expectations, and then we will talk about these different fat diets. But these next two slides are research about bariatric surgery patients that have successfully lost significant amounts of weight, maintained that weight for 3 years on this first slide. The next slide is 5 years. And we're going to talk about the habits they report. So basically, well, what are they doing? What are patients that have successfully lost weight and kept it off? What are they doing? Well, probably won't surprise you, but I think it can be really helpful to say, oh, you know what? The results are in and nobody's surprised. They are staying consistent and doing things that, maybe seem kind of boring, but they're staying consistent with these things. So the green indicates these are the most common behaviors. So research-wise, these were the things that were reported most often. Patients reported that they weighed themselves once a week. So they checked in on their weight. They weren't, weighing constantly every day, but they were checking in once a week rather than ignoring it. They listened to fullness cues. So they stopped eating when they were full, and they weren't grazing. So they stopped eating continuously through the day. So set meal times. It was a common reported habit for patients that kept weight off at 3 years post-op. And the blue means that these were also behaviors that were reported. The green ones were just the most common reported. But they were maintaining physical activity, maintaining food records, participating in support groups. Congratulations if you're watching this on a support group. Adequate sleep and stress management, non-food strategies to cope with emotions, realistic pre-op expectations. That's why it's great to talk about expectations. Adherence to scheduled visits, compliance with nutrition recommendations to the best of your ability. Nobody's perfect. Compliance doesn't mean perfection. It just means consistency and reevaluating and, trying new recipes and meal planning and packing snacks and doing what you can to get protein in first. Mindful eating. So, eating at a table instead of at the car in front of the TV, but taking small bites, going slowly, paying attention to fullness cues so you can stop eating at fullness, and meal planning, which kind of mentioned that one. So I like this next one. It's very similar, but it is a different study. They look at 5 or more years post-op. And this gave us a little bit more numbers. I hear that all the time. How many calories should I be eating? What should my macros be? Take this with a grain of salt. Don't look at these calories and think that's what I need to be eating. Because again, averages, some are more, some are less. There's nuances. This is why working with a dietitian is highly recommended, because that's more individualized. But these are some examples. So let's skip over the calories. But 49% protein is very hard to do unless you're eating protein at each of your meals. So protein first meals, moderate carbohydrate, that's pretty low fat. And then this box here, protein first daily. So protein at each meal, avoiding high sugar foods, fast food less than once a week, sit down restaurant less than a week. So eating at home, focusing on protein. Those things don't happen by accident. It happens because of meal planning, right? So it's similar to the not grazing and meal planning from the previous slide. Avoiding carbonated beverages, avoiding eating too large of meal portions, avoiding grazing on food, eating mindfully, keep attending surgical follow-up, vigorous exercise, just meaning like, a good workout. So these are all behaviors reported by what they classify as highly successful patients. That is in research standards. We're not saying this person's highly successful and this person's not successful. It's research standards. We don't put those labels on people. Everybody is different and everyone has different seasons of life. There's no pass fail and we're never done, right? You can always pick up where you left off and keep going. But that is statistically anyone that they kind of drew the line at people that lost 80% of their excess body weight. So in that example of if I had 100 pounds to lose, someone that lost 80 pounds and kept it off for 5 or more years, that's what they're putting in the highly successful patient group in reporting these behaviors. So I wanted to put these slides in because before we go over these popular diets, it's just a reminder that it's not really about what diet should you be doing as much as it is what habits do I need to get back to? What foundational habits do I need to get back to meal planning? Do I need to get back to my water goals? Do I need to get back to, planning out my meals, eating at a table, not eating out as much? A lot of this stuff isn't going to be surprising. It's just how can I make it work in my life in this season that I'm in right now? Okay, as a recap, especially before we go into popular diets, we want to talk about, well, what are the nutrition guidelines for bariatric surgery patients? Because we have to put those goggles on before we look at any other diets. So, well, what should I be doing as a bariatric surgery patient? These are recommendations both from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics and the American Society of Metabolic and Bariatric Surgery. Structured daily meal times, again, not grazing, but structured breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Protein first. Solid foods that provide volume and satiety. Satiety is feeling full, satisfied. Nutrient-dense, minimally processed whole foods, so an emphasis on not refined carbohydrates, but lean proteins and vegetables. 48 to 64 ounces of hydrating fluids a day, in some instances more than that, but avoiding high calorie or carbonated fluids. Avoiding fluids with your meals and for 30 to 60 minutes after the meal. Alcohol consumption is not advised. Programs differ on that, but these are ASMBS kind of as a general. Limit added sugars to no more than 25 grams a day. Program's a little bit different about how much they want you to really like nickel and dime that. But as a general, we want to focus on proteins and vegetables and being careful with sugary foods. Avoid fatty or fried foods. Practice mindful eating, small bites, going slowly, and physical activity. So, anytime you're going to look at a new diet, we need to filter it through those recommendations. So, if you're considering doing a new eating plan, different than what you've done before, these are some questions to ask. And we are going to talk about the pouch reset as well, because that's kind of a big question. I'm still putting that kind of in the category of, a new diet. So what is it? These are some questions to ask yourself. What is it about this diet that seems exciting to you? Is there something that feels exciting or motivating? Like, is there a reason why? Because sometimes you want to tap into that. If you're feeling excited to try something new, then, I don't want to put that down right away and say like, no, don't do that. Well, maybe we can tap into that motivation and excitement and we could lean into that. So maybe we could make that work for you if it still is within the boundaries of a healthy bariatric diet. Another question, though, is to ask, well, have you tried something like this in the past? And how did it go for you? And maybe the answer is yes. That's why I'm excited because I did something like this before and I really liked it. Or maybe you're like, yeah, I tried something like this in the past and it actually didn't work that well because I just traveled too much, or it didn't work for the family, or I couldn't stick with it. It was really tedious. So sometimes we can kind of figure it out for ourselves based on the past, if it's going to be a good idea. Where did you hear about it? Can be really helpful because, if you heard about it from a trusted source, a trusted source could be like a really good friend that you trust. Like, oh yeah, I mean, Cheryl's doing this and like she swears by it and she does her research. She spends time on things like she's not somebody that's always doing crazy diets. Like I really think she's somebody I trust and I feel like we could probably do it together and encourage each other. Then listen to that. That might be another reason that you're feeling excited. You've got somebody to do it with. It has some value to it. Or it could be like, well, I heard about it from social media. I don't, I'm not really sure what it means. I don't have a whole lot of information of where it came from. So where did you hear about it actually can uncover uh, a lot, depending on if you feel like there's a lot of value behind it. And again, going back to the slide that we just covered, how does it differ or complement the bariatric recommendations? Can we keep it in line with, using those goggles? Can it complement, or is it going to be way too complicated and at odds with what's recommended because you've had a surgical anatomy change in your body that we have to consider? Okay, now we're going to shift gears and talk about some popular mainstream diets. Some of these are still really popular. Some of these aren't as much as they used to be. But we're still going to kind of go through this as an example of if you hear about a new diet that I'm not covering today, you can see what questions I would ask if something came up. So these are the three things I'm going to go through on each of these. What is the origin story of the diet? Like, where did this diet come from? What is it recommending? Can it work with the bariatric guidelines or not? Keto. I think keto is still pretty big. It comes and goes. There's different versions of keto. There's even a bariatric keto, so it just depends. Okay, so quick origin story on keto. It's been around a long time. In 1920, it was really introduced for epilepsy treatment. It's still used for epilepsy. Once seizure medications were introduced, the diet was used less, but it still is used commonly in children, and they might be admitted to a hospital and followed by a ketogenic team of providers to follow a child on a strict ketogenic diet and see how it does for epilepsy. But ketogenic diets gained popularity in the 90s for weight loss. And really, keto is kind of this overarching umbrella that a lot of low carb diets fall under. Because what is it recommending? A ketogenic diet is any diet that puts the body into a state of ketosis when it's really low carbohydrate. So when there's not as much carbohydrate available in the body for fuel, the body needs to break down fat for energy, and ketones are created as a byproduct. So mainstream diets that fall in this category include Atkins, South Beach, Paleo. So that's why you're like, oh yeah, the diets of the 90s. Those sound familiar. So we call them keto. Keto's become kind of a popular name now. And you're like, well, keto just sounds like Atkins. Well, because they really are kind of the same thing. They're going, it means the same end, really. So the focus is on a low carbohydrate diet more than on calorie counting. So somebody that's doing a keto diet is looking way more at carbs than they are calories. A mainstream keto kind of, traditional keto diet is going to be as high as 75% fat. A strict keto diet for epilepsy might go as high as 90% fat, meaning 90% of the calories are coming from fat, or 75% in that case. But there are many iterations of a keto diet. So bodybuilders or athletes or even lazy keto, there's lots of different options. And so they might change it and say, okay, well, keto 2.0 means we do 50% fat, or berry keto means we do a different version. So there's also different variations where they change how much of your calories come from fat. And so when people say macros, they're talking about like if you were to journal your food in a app like MyFitnessPal or Bariatric, and when you put your food in that app and it puts your food into that pie chart, that's the macro pie chart. Macros are protein, carbohydrate, and fat. And they're saying, of this pie chart, how much of your calories is coming from fat. And so if it's 50% fat, because you're doing keto 2.0, for example. So I'm kind of moving into macros a little bit, but all of these buzzwords have been really big at the past few years. Macros, keto. Yeah, a lot to be said there. I have a lot of blogs on this too. So if you want to read more about macros, keto, I have blogs. You go to bariatricfoodcoach.com and use the search bar. Is there any research on keto? So there's tons of research on keto. And you can find research that supports lots of things, and you can find research that supports keto. But there's not a whole lot specifically to bariatric surgery and keto losing rebound weight. So when I say there's not very much research, I'm talking about bariatric surgery patients with a mainstream keto diet of 75% fat. That's where there's not a whole lot of research. There's plenty of research on keto. One study I did find reported bariatric patients in keto diets, but using a very low calorie ketogenic diet, which means it's also low in fat. So it's like low fat, low carb. It was safe, it was effective, but there was limitations of that study. So it was a whole lot of help as far as how long that eating plan could work. So can keto be incorporated in the bariatric guidelines? Not in the classic form of keto of 70 to 75% fat, because bariatric guidelines recommend no more than 25 to 30% from fat, because it's really hard on the digestive tract. Dumping syndrome primarily, especially bypass patients, but sleep patients, DS patients can also have dumping symptoms. So the emphasis on fat as the primary macro is going to conflict with the bariatric guidelines to focus on protein first. So keto typically is not a good bariatric eating plan because it's a fat first, and we want to focus on protein first. So low carbohydrate, sure, but the emphasis on fat is where there's a miss. So that's something to consider with keto. So what to consider as a post-op, a bariatric eating plan focusing on lean proteins and veggies kind of is a ketogenic diet, because again, a ketogenic diet is when there's not enough carbohydrate available that the body's breaking down fat. So in a sense, a bariatric surgery diet that's focused on proteins and vegetables kind of is a ketogenic diet. It's just not a high-fat ketogenic diet. So keeping the emphasis on protein instead of fat will provide an overall lower calorie intake. So when you see keto recipes, identify what lower fat ingredients or alternatives you could swap out, like a lower fat cheese or using turkey bacon or turkey sausage. Instead of like half and half, using like almond milk or depending on what the recipe is, trying to find a lower fat option. Because they're usually keto, they have recipes that are fat bombs, all about the fat. So you want to look for, you know, alternatives that are going to be lower in calorie. Also, be cautious with products marketing keto. Um, I like if you go to the frozen section and they have like TV dinners. I don't know if we still call them TV dinners, but you know what I'm talking about. If it says keto on the front, turn it around just for fun. Look at how much fat is on there, but you could easily find 50 grams of fat on one TV dinner because it says keto on the front. So be very careful about products marketing keto. It's incredible how much fat will be in those products. Okay, intermittent fasting. I might pick up the pace a little bit on these. Origin story. Well, fasting itself has been done for centuries for cultural or religious reasons. Fasting for health has been advocated even since the late 1950s. There's a lot of data on metabolism and fasting. There, you can find a lot of research on intermittent fasting. But again, the question is, can it work in bariatrics? So, what is intermittent fasting recommending? Well, fasting is the intentional abstention from food. Intermittent fasting is designated periods of abstaining from food, and then you have like feeding times and fasting times. There are many approaches to fasting schedules. So the approach does not state to eat less, but rather when to eat. So eating within a designated time frame and then abstaining at other times. So advocates of intermittent fasting would still emphasize the importance of clean eating and quality food, but it's not actually giving like specific food and nutrition advice. But some people might say, I'm doing keto and intermittent fasting because intermittent fasting itself is not diet. It's a schedule. It's an eating schedule. It's not really an eating plan, like a food plan. But a lot of people will add, Whole30 to intermittent fasting or something like that. The most common approach is 16 hours of fasting with an 8-hour feeding window. Another approach is 20 hours of fasting with 4 hours of feeding. Some people will alternate days of fasting and feeding. So the schedule changes, but the whole idea of it is feeding times and fasting times. Okay, so is there research? There's lots of research about intermittent fasting, but is there research specific to bariatric surgery patients? Okay, well, the methodology behind intermittent fasting is that insulin levels spike after a meal and then they slowly return to baseline. When insulin levels are high, it's more difficult to burn fat. So if food is eaten before insulin returns to baseline, insulin spikes again, keeping the body in a higher insulin state. So intermittent fasting instead would allow the dieter to stay in a fasted low insulin state for most of the day, making it easier to burn fat when eating at this calorie deficit. So long-term effects of intermittent fasting aren't fully known. A lot of studies are on animals for shorter periods of time, and there is not research on intermittent fasting specific to bariatric surgery. I'm going to jump ahead here. Can it be incorporated with bariatric guidelines? The biggest challenge with intermittent fasting and bariatrics is meeting protein needs with a shortened time frame. The second greatest challenge is blood sugar control because hypoglycemia is a higher risk after surgery, and prolonged periods of fasting can make that even harder. So if you have had any issues with low blood sugars, do not think intermittent fasting is a good idea. But even without that complication, it's really difficult to get your protein in with a smaller stomach. And then if we also take time away from when you can eat, it can make it that much more difficult to get in protein and fiber with a small stomach and less time to eat. So, no research on bariatric surgery and intermittent fasting. There is research that compares the two methods for as an obesity treatment. So they compare the two, and bariatric surgery continues to be the most successful treatment compared to non-surgical. So intermittent fasting compared against bariatric surgery was more significant. If you tend to snack at night, sure, it's possible a defined schedule of eating and fasting can help manage snacking, but it's also worthwhile to visit with your dietitian how you can control your hunger better through the day to set you up for evening. So that's intermittent fasting. Okay. WW, formerly Weight Watchers. Did you know that it's not Weight Watchers anymore? It's been WW for a long time. WW also has been doing GLP-1s, although I think it's compounded GLP-1s, which are no longer going to be available because this is definitely a sidebar. Compounded medications are only allowed to be available during a time of a shortage, but a lot of the name brand GLP-1s, which is Wegovy, is semaglutide. The name brand of semaglutide for obesity treatment is Wegovy. Zepbound is tirzepatide for obesity is the name brand, Zepbound. So when those are not in a shortage, compounded versions are not allowed to be offered. So I'd have to go back. Now I'm curious because I don't know. I need to see what WW is doing, but they have been offering medical management alongside their eating program. But I don't know now because I know compounded medications are changing things or the withdrawal of availability. I won't go through a whole lot of WW origin story. You all are familiar with WW. The points system has changed tons through the years. I don't think I'm going to go through all of that. You probably have done iterations of WW. If you're anything like me, I have done it. I did Weight Watchers in high school. But the newest version, I think this is the newest version, unless I'm outdated, was at the end of 2021. The new personalized point system. They say no to people are alike, so no two plans are alike. So when a user joins, they're asked a series of questions via the personal points engine. And then they're designed a unique personal points budget and a 0 points food list. So personal points are calculated using calories, fiber, protein, added sugar, saturated fats, unsaturated fats. Sounds really complicated to me. Points are really complicated in my opinion. Values go up with added sugars and saturated fats. They go down with protein, fiber, and unsaturated fats. So basically, higher quality foods mean the point values go down. You can eat more of them. Lesser quality, your point value is going to go up so that you won't eat as much of them. Everyone gets a customized plan with a personalized 0 point food list. So 0 point means you can have as much as you want of this 0 point plan. And it's based on likes, dislikes, commonly eaten foods. In addition to your daily points allowance and your 0 point list, you also get weekly points and rollover points. It does feel confusing to me. You can also earn additional points. So, for example, if you eat a cup of non-starchy vegetables, you get a point added. So you can kind of gamify it where now you can drink water and earn another point. Eat vegetables and earn another point. So you can do 0 point foods, you can earn more points. You're kind of getting rewarded for eating. The better you eat, the more points are available. There's nothing at WW that I know of. Let me know if I'm wrong. It's hard to keep up with it all. So if I'm ever wrong, send me an email. But there's nothing at WW that's specific to a bariatric surgery patient. So if you've had a bariatric surgery, you go to WW, there's nothing in that onboarding questionnaire that says, have you had a bariatric surgery? So there's nothing that's going to differentiate you from someone with a full-size stomach. There's no research specific to personal points and bariatrics. The website did have an article in February 2022 with links to research studies supporting their methods. So that's fine. No research specific to bariatric surgery patients. WW has a long-standing reputation. They employ medical professionals. They focus on healthy lifestyle changes, behavioral weight management, has built-in accountability for patients to check in and keep consistency. Lots of great things about WW. I have lots of positive things to say. There's just nothing specific for bariatrics. So because the program can't tell the user specifically what to eat, a bariatric patient could, in theory, utilize the program and then stay consistent with bariatric guidelines. There's nothing that would straight up conflict with bariatric guidelines. You could just basically make the points work for what you need them to work for. But it would kind of require your dietitian to dig in to what should your points actually be, because it's assuming that you have this full-size stomach that's going to give you a ton of points, and now you can have all these 0-point foods, and now you can earn all these extra points. And I think it would take a little bit more finessing what would really make sense. So it would require that you like sign up and then take the results back to the dietitian and like really dig into it. I think the point system overall can be confusing, but for some patients, they like the accountability and familiarity of WW. So it's not a hard no, but I think it can be kind of complicated. Noom, I'm going to zoom through Noom. But Noom was founded by a tech entrepreneur and a Google engineer. So it's not primarily founded by health professionals. It's founded by tech professionals. They started with fitness apps. It eventually became Noom. They, similarly to WW, I would say they're the biggest competitor to WW. They ask a bunch of personalized questions. They too are doing medication options. Again, I don't know what they're doing now with the compounded options. Their food system is a little bit different than points, but they are doing what is called a volumetrics approach to weight loss. Basically like the food density, the quality of food. So they put it into colors, green, yellow, red. So it's different than points, but it's similar in the way that you can get more green foods and less of the red foods. So green colored foods are going to be least calorie, most nutrient dense, like fruits, veggies, whole grains. Yellow foods are going to be low fat dairy, black beans, chicken, tuna, salmon. Red foods are going to be nut butters, olive oil, pita bread, flours, tortillas, hard to resist foods. But I do find it interesting that a lot of our lean proteins are in the yellow, because for bariatric surgery patients, we would have you start with that. Marketing information for Noom uses a lot of language around psychology and has really extensive questionnaires to make it feel like a customized experiences. They have health coaches. There's no dietitians employed for this company, at least not at the last time that I checked. There's not specific research with Noom and bariatric surgery. Noom does have some scientific studies, but I noticed it was funded by the company. It shows success in non-surgical patients. Again, we don't have success in surgical. Online reviews were mixed. Some described hidden fees or felt like the coaching wasn't individualized and was scripted. Can it be incorporated in bariatric guidelines? I would say there's a good amount of discrepancy with the colors. I could see it being really confusing that you can have unlimited, some of these whole grains in the green category, and then some of your lean proteins are in the yellow. So I think if somebody wanted to do something in Noom, I would probably rearrange some of the colors, which might be really hard to reorient your brain to say, I'm allowed to have more of those. So I think it's tricky. I think it's possible, but tricky. I'm going to skip through Optavia a little bit, but this is also, it's a subsidiary of Medifast. So these are prepackaged meals. There's a really great book that is called what's the book called? So the system is called the Transformation Through Holistic Wellness. Dr. Anderson's Habits of Health Transformation System has all these like micro habits of health, but it does use these fuelings, which can get to be expensive, and it, isn't really, building up your meal planning, and you're utilizing and relying on product. So, I think it's possible, maybe use it as like a get back on track. Maybe it's a way to kind of revisit habits, but maybe not the best long-term strategy. I haven't read the book, but I think that Dr. Anderson's book I think it comes highly recommended in terms of learning habit change. I think that's the Habits of Health system and book would be a great thing just to learn about habit change. Bright line eating, I'm also going to jump ahead on that one. But this is a book, this was popular for a while, and it's pretty restrictive, very, very restrictive. Abstinence from added sugar, sweeteners, flours, no eating between meals. The 4 bright lines are sugar, flour, meals, and quantities. So it's very structured. It takes a liberating stand against moderation. So I think dietitians are a little skittish on this one, that it could trigger disordered eating, eating disorders, especially if you have a history of that. So this is one that I would take some serious considering. If I had a patient that was interested in this one, I would want to have a long conversation before I would sign up to support them for that. Okay, I want to spend time on pouch resets before we wrap it up. Pouch resets, the origin story is that it was created in 2007 when a bypass patient was trying to shrink her stomach back to her early post-op size. She developed the 5-day pouch reset, mimicking the early healing diets of liquids and soft and solid food. So I want you to hear that a patient made this, and it's not founded in science, and you can't shrink your stomach back to a post-op size because your early post-op stomach had a ton of inflammation from being operated on. There's no going back to that. So typically what it recommends for a 5-day pouch set is day 1, clears, day 2, fulls, day 3, pureed food, day 4, soft food, and then day 5, back to solids. So reset diets are misleading in that you're resetting your pouch, you're shrinking your stomach, and there's no evidence, there's no scientific papers. It's a myth, because it's a myth that you've stretched out your stomach. Most likely when someone feels their stomach has been stretched, it's because the textures they're eating are really soft and they move through faster, or drinking with meals empties the stomach faster. High starch foods, cereals, soups, drinking with meals, or grazing, they're habits that make it seem like you can eat more and then make you feel like you've stretched your stomach. But going back to solid protein, small bites, going slowly, not drinking with your meal, the restriction is still there, but there's no scientific evidence that you're actually shrinking the stomach if you do a 5-day reset. So it's not necessary. And it may not contradict bariatric guidelines, but it's a short-term solution in a long-term journey. So going back to lean solid proteins, taking small bites, eating slowly, avoiding fluids while eating, and 30 to 60 minutes after the restriction is there. So some patients do a pouch reset to clear their mind and feel back on track, but again, it's not necessary. Getting back to basics is really all that's needed. Back to those slides of those habits that patients that are 3 and 5 years post-op have recommended. Also, don't forget that bombardment of weight loss ads. They are everywhere. I won't go through them, but you know what I'm talking about. We are all inundated with weight loss advertisements. So in summary, obesity is a chronic, relapsing, multifactorial disease. Bariatric surgery is the most effective treatment to this chronic disease, but consistent follow-up is essential. And asking for more help if more treatment is needed, what other habits we need to support you in building, if medications are warranted, and so on. Okay, well, I'm going to finish this up here, but this is where you can reach me and come find me online.